Hello fellow crochet lovers. Today I'm going to be showing you 3 different Christmas stocking patterns you can crochet for this holiday season. These stockings will all differ from one another, but they will all be made with number 4 worsted weight yarn. We'll start off with the easier pattern first and work our way to the more complex ones. Today we're going to be looking at the Christmas stocking pattern by Red Heart, the Peppermint Stocking pattern by the Lavender Chair, and lastly the very beautiful stocking pattern by Peach and Paige Designs. I'll have details and links to all these patterns in the description box below. At the time of filming this, these patterns are all free at the links provided, with some of them having paid ad-free versions available as well. I'll be giving you my first impressions on these patterns, any suggestions I might have for someone crocheting them, and I'll also mention how long each pattern took me to crochet as someone who's making these patterns for the first time as well. Because as we all know, a pattern takes the longest to make when it's your first time making it. Let's get started with our first stocking pattern. This stocking is a Red Heart pattern and can be found for free on the Yarnspirations website. This pattern is classified as easy, and we'll get to why in a second. This took me about 4.5 hours to make, so it'll still be a little time consuming even if it doesn't look good. The yarn colors I have used are Antique White, Shamrock Green, and Poppy Red, and yes, they are all different brands. The pattern mainly uses a 5mm hook and then switches to a 4mm hook. I'll let you know when. The stitches used in this pattern are the single crochet stitch and the double crochet stitch. You will also need to know how to single crochet 2 stitches together. This pattern has been classified as easy by the people over at Red Heart, and you can see why in this main stocking section. This section is entirely made up of alternating rows of single crochet and double crochet, which I, and I'm sure many others as well, consider to be foundational stitches when you're learning to crochet. I have slowed down a few sections here where you can see how a single crochet stitch is made and how a double crochet stitch is made. But let me know in the comment section down below if you're entirely new to crochet and would like a series on stitches and how to get started. I think that could be a fun little series. Back to the stocking. The alternating rows give this stocking panel a nice, simple yet detailed look, with the double crochet stitch rows adding some height and texture in between the rows of the single crochet. You're going to want to keep doing this until you have a panel of about 10 inches. Once we've got our 10-inch panel made, we move on to the heel section of the stocking. This part is entirely single crochet stitches, and in case you missed it, there's a slowed down version of how to make a single crochet in the section before this one. This part can be a little bit tricky for anyone that's never made a stock pattern before and has never tried out a heel section, but I promise, if we move through this section slowly and read the pattern thoroughly, we'll have a great looking heel in no time. As you can see, we'll be joining the top part of the panel here to create the heel, and this will ultimately make it easier later on when we have to sew these panel parts shut. The heel comes together nicely and easily, but there will be gaps in the corner. Now, don't freak out. That's totally expected and part of the pattern. We'll sew those shut later on. When the beautifully simple heel is completed and we're happy with our work, we move on to the foot section of the stocking. This part looks exactly like the main stocking section because it's meant to be a continuation of that section. We're looking for continuity and symmetry. They could have made a stocking where the main section looks different from the foot section, but they didn't. And to be honest, I don't know if anyone has, but it's something I'll look into because that could be a great little project for my Christmas collection next year. Let me know down below if you'd be interested in something like that. Back on track here, we're doing alternating rows of single crochet and double crochet stitches again. And I know we all know, but just a little reminder for anyone who needs it, there are slowed down versions of the single crochet stitch and the double crochet stitch in the first part of this video when we were making the main stocking section. Moving on, we're working on the toe section. This section is like the heel in that it's made entirely using the single crochet stitch. This toe section is where I will admit that even I had a little bit of trouble. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't a hard part of the pattern and it wasn't hard to understand. So what happened? Well, honestly, it looked too pointy. I finished it and found that it looked too jagged, so I frogged it, thinking I had read something wrong or misunderstood the pattern somehow. Nope, it just looks that way. I didn't want to change the look and vibe of the stocking entirely, so I just added a chain one at the beginning of the rows when we turn our work. It's not in the original pattern, but at least it looks a little bit less jarring than how it was going to look without the chain. We now sew these panels together. We'll be sewing the main stocking section, the foot section, and the toe section. This is also where we're going to be taking care of that gap in the corner of the heel. This is where I agree that this pattern is easy. It's not worked in rounds, it's not intimidating, it's written in a way that you're just doing fundamental stitches throughout and then joining the panels that you've made in the end. There's no confusion with how you turn your work, there's no slip stitches to join your rounds, it's simple and easy paneling. But it's still up to everyone's level of experience and comfort as to whether they prefer this method or not. If you got some experience with making changes to patterns, you can also skip this altogether by making this pattern in the rounds. I didn't do it because I wanted to show you all the original pattern, but it should really be as simple as joining your rounds with a slip stitch. Let me know below if you prefer paneling or if you're going to try joining the rounds. I'd love to hear some input on this. Lastly, we make the adorable cuff. The cuff is entirely single crochet stitches. Once again, it's just a simple panel that we sew closed at the end. Very simple, very elegant. The edging, however, is an entirely different ballpark. We're going to be using single crochet stitches and double crochet stitches to achieve that beautiful little shell look. The edging is worked in two parts. You've got the bottom edging and the top edging. Let's look at the bottom edging first. The bottom edging is made before we attach the cuff to the stocking, and it's made with the same hook we've been using so far, the 5mm. The top edging, however, is made with the 4mm hook that I said we'd need later on. First, we'll need to attach the cuff to the stocking itself, and then on top of that, we'll make our little shells with the smaller hook. I don't know why, but I've always been absolutely obsessed with these little shell borders. I incorporate them into every baby blanket I have ever gifted. They're just so adorable and simple, and I cannot get enough of them. This cuff area is great because it's wide enough that if you know how to embroider, which I don't, but some of you might, you can definitely embroider a name or something on there. Overall, the stocking is simple, but it's an acquired taste. The final product looks a little bit flat, almost 2D, and might not be everyone's cup of tea. As I mentioned before, the toe section is pointy, and the paneling method gives the stocking a flat vibe. It's a great pattern for beginners, but not one that I can see myself using. Let's move on to our next pattern. This next pattern is from the Lavender Chair, and it can be found on their website. They have classified this pattern as intermediate, and we'll see why as we go through the pattern. This stocking took me about 4 hours to complete, and it's actually the quickest of all three. The colors I have used are antique white, shamrock green, and poppy red, all the same ones you saw in the last stocking. This pattern uses a 5.5mm hook throughout, so you don't have to worry about having another sized hook on hand. Let's get started on the pattern. This pattern is worked from the toe up, so there will be no paneling in this one. We're going to be working in the rounds and joining our last stitch to the first one with a slip stitch. We'll need to know how to work with a magic ring, also called a magic loop or magic circle, and probably many other things. But if you don't know how to do one, I've slowed it down a little bit and hopefully that helps. This toe area is entirely half double crochet stitches. I've also slowed that down a little bit in case anyone needs a little refresher. All too often, I go into a pattern thinking I know how to do a certain stitch, and once I try to actually do it, it looks wrong, and I have to quickly Google how to do it. So I try to incorporate little sections here and there that get everyone a little refresher on what making the particular stitch would look like. I think the pattern calls for half double crochet stitches because they are solid and look very nicely uniform without being as tiny as a single crochet stitch and without being as big as a double crochet stitch. This section is made in just one color, in my case green, as an accent to the peppermint themed red and white that we'll be using next. Working upwards as promised, we reach the foot section. In the original pattern, this is called the body of the stocking, but I wanted to be able to differentiate between this section and the section that comes after the heel. This is where all the fun starts. We are going to be alternating colors in every row. That's right, every row will be a different color. And what does that mean? Say it with me now. Rows and rows of ends that need to be weaved in later on. Everyone's favorite thing to do. Not really, but the stocking is so incredibly gorgeous, I think some people might want to risk all the ends to get this final product. The color switching can look a little bit intimidating, and don't get me wrong, I can totally see why, but let me reassure everyone that it's really not that bad. I stuck with the original red and white peppermint candy cane-esque look because I think it's really cute, but you can definitely change these colors up and make it match your vibe or theme. We'll be alternating the colors in each row and then joining with the slip stitch to create a round look, which after that last stocking is greatly appreciated. I prefer to join in my new color at the slip stitch. It just feels easier and more natural to me, but the original pattern recommends finishing the slip stitch with the color you're already using and then slip stitching your new color in before doing your chain 2. I think it's completely up to you how you're comfortable doing this, as the stocking looks amazing regardless. This section is made with a special double crochet 2 together stitch that this designer has used. I recommend checking their website for a very detailed written instructions on how to complete the stitch. I've also slowed down a section for you to be able to see it in action because I know some people learn better by seeing instead of reading. I had to read out and try this stitch a couple of times before I felt completely comfortable doing it, but by the end of the stocking, it felt completely natural and it easily became a stitch I'd want to use again in the future. And just as I warned at the beginning, there will be lots and lots of ends. Here is the proof and a reminder that these will need to be taken care of. Let's take a break from all this color switching and work on the heel section. Much like the toe section, we'll be making this in our accent color. Mine is green, yours can be whatever you'd like. But unlike the heel section, here we'll be working with single crochet stitches for a tighter look. This is where you'll need to know how to single crochet 2 stitches together. Once again, I've slowed this down to help anyone who isn't sure how to do this. And once again, you'll end up with some gaps in that heel, but do not panic, because once again, that is totally normal and we'll be sewing that closed later on. Once we are happy with our heel, we continue to the body of the stocking. Yes, that means we're back to switching the colors in every row. Just like in the foot section, we'll be working our rows and joining the last stitch to the first stitch with a slip stitch at the end of the round. Wow, I said stitch a lot in that sentence, which I guess is the making of a great crochet video? Maybe? I don't know. Quick reminder to use the opposite color of what we ended with before starting the heel to continue the alternating rows accurately. It would be horribly annoying to find out later on that the wrong color was used, and now there are 2 rows of the same color in the center of your stocking. Just like in the foot section, this whole section is made with that special double crochet 2 together stitch. Have you become accustomed to it yet? Let me know in the comments. I think by this point I felt pretty comfortable making it, but that might not be the case for everyone, and I'd love to hear your point of view. When all the beautiful rows of red and white, or whichever colors you picked, are done, we move on to the cuff. Using the same crochet hook we've been using so far, join in your accent color. This section is just like the toe section, all half double crochet stitches throughout, making this section a great and simple finish to the stocking. And by now you're probably thinking something is missing, right? We've done all the sections. We're coming up on the end of the pattern, but something is missing. What is it? A hanging loop. So this pattern doesn't actually include one, but that didn't stop me from adding one myself. I needed a hanging loop. I guess it depends on how you're displaying your stocking and what your setup is in your home, but I didn't feel right not including a loop. This part is not part of the original pattern. The original pattern ends with the cuff and sewing the heel shut and weaving in your ends. So right before the last few stitches on the cuff, I did a chain 14 and I slip stitched my last chain to the same stitch the chain started on. I then finished my row and closed it up. And of course, you can chain as many or as few chains to fit your needs. Let me know below if you found the hanging loop helpful or if you've got a different way of setting up your stockings that doesn't require a hanging loop. As promised, we can now take care of those heel gaps by sewing them shut in whichever way you find best, and we can also weave in all those pesky ends. There are a lot of them, but I think they're worth it because once you're done with that, you've got yourself a beautiful stocking for the holiday season. Overall, this pattern is amazing. It's easy to understand, everything is explained well, and it looks absolutely stunning. The color changing feels intimidating at first, but it gives us a great final result that's completely worth it, even if there are a million little ends to weave in. It's a great stocking and a great pattern, and one that I'd proudly display in my home for the holiday season. Let's move on to our next and final pattern. This stocking is from Peach and Paige Designs and can be found on their website. If you're anything like me, you're looking at this final project and you cannot wait to get started, so let's not waste any time. The yarn colors I have used are Antique White and Shamrock Green for a classic look. We'll need a 5.5mm hook to start and a 6mm hook later on. This pattern took me about 5 hours, but it's totally worth every second. Just like our last pattern, this pattern uses a magic circle or magic ring or magic loop or whatever you call it in your region and is worked from the toe up. This toe section is made of half double crochet stitches, and once again, I know I keep saying it, but I've included a slowed down version of how to make this stitch. Make sure to make this section in whatever accent color you're going to want for your heel and your cuff. I picked the Shamrock Green for this, but in the original pattern, they used a white accent on a purple stocking, and it's absolutely stunning. I went with a more traditional color combination, but let me know what combination you use in the comments below. I'd love to read them. The rows in this section are worked in the round and joined with a slip stitch at the end, but don't get too comfortable with this method, it'll change soon enough. When we're finished with the toe, we switch over to the main color of the stocking, in my case the antique white, and begin the rows of the new stitch we'll be using for this beautiful stocking. It's called the berry stitch. I've included a slowed down version of this stitch, but I highly recommend going to the original website to check out the written description and the pictures that the designers have included, because it was extremely helpful in learning how to do this stitch. This foot section is worked in back and forth rows that are joined with a slip stitch. This helps keep the seams straight. We'll be alternating rows of single crochet stitches and the berry stitches. The rows of single crochet stitches really help out the berry stitches in my opinion, because they're so tiny and simple that it really allows the berry stitch space to shine bright, as they should. Very mindful, very adorable. The berry stitch is really one of the most beautiful stitches I've ever had the pleasure of doing, and although it's quite simple, it does take some getting used to before it feels like a fluid movement. I've never done this stitch before making the stocking, so it took me a few tries before getting it right, but oh my goodness, was it ever worth it. It kind of reminds me of a popcorn stitch or a puff stitch, and I might even want to do a short video distinguishing between those and the berry stitch, but I'm undecided, so let me know in the comments below if that's something you'd be interested in seeing. Once we've reached the appropriate number of rows for this foot section, we get to move on to the heel section. We're going to want to join in our accent color here so it matches the toe section we've already made. This section can look intimidating. As I've mentioned in every heel section we have done in this video, heels are hard. Sometimes they look weird, they feel weird when you're making them, everyone does them differently. It's usually a whole ordeal. However, this pattern is the exception. This is where I reassure everyone that heels are easy if we read through everything carefully and slowly. But honestly, these are the most direct and clear pattern instructions for a heel that I have ever seen, and not only that, but they have included pictures in their pattern. I know I sound like a broken record, but really check out their pattern website and make this stocking. It's gorgeous and they've honestly made it so simple. Okay, enough gushing. Back to the heel. We're working this heel in rows and turning our work at the end of the rows. We're doing single crochet stitches, so it's nice and easy and solid. We're making an hourglass shape and worrying about sewing it shut later. The only thing about this heel to be mindful of is the sewing. This heel needs to be sewn together, and that's fine, but you can't sew it together any which way. It needs to be sewn together with the right sides together so that it can be flipped right side out when you're done. This part got me. I'll admit, I may not have read the pattern as carefully as I should have when I did this. So I sewed the heel shut, except the right sides weren't together and I couldn't flip it, so I had to undo the sewed part and redo it. Don't be like me. Read carefully. Follow instructions. They're trying to help you, I swear. Okay, we read the pattern carefully, we closed the heel properly. When do we get back to the gorgeous berry stitches, you're wondering? Now, the leg portion of this pattern is the same as the foot, of course. So we alternate the single crochet stitches with the berry stitches, and we continue the gorgeous and textured vibe of this work. I honestly cannot get enough of the texture this stocking has, which is probably why I keep showing it. You might not believe me, but the clips you've seen of me showing off the texture of the stocking are just the tip of the iceberg. There were so many, but I obviously couldn't include them all, even if I wanted to. So I have to settle for consistently and repetitively telling you how beautiful the stocking looks. Do you like stitches that give texture, or do you prefer flatter stitches? Let me know in the comments, because I want to believe I'm not the only one that loves textured stitches, but unless someone confirms it, it's just a belief. Back to the leg section. We keep alternating these rows until you've got a beautiful and large stocking taking shape. Once you reach the number of rows and the specified size, did I mention the pattern has two sizes? Whoops. Well, I'm saying it now. There's a standard size and a mini size. Do with that what you will. The possibilities are endless. We're now going to move on to the cuff. This section is made with our accent color again, and the 6mm hook I mentioned earlier, and it's worked in rows. But not just any rows. We'll need to slip stitch these rows to the main stocking area, and we'll need to know how to crochet in the back loop only. That's how we get that beautiful textured look that almost gives off a knit vibe. Sound off in the comments if you knit and if this technique reminds you of that. I've slowed down an example of me doing the back loop only technique in case that sounds like complete gibberish, or in case you've never been quite clear on what that means. I remember when I started crocheting, I had a hard time distinguishing the back back loop. Don't ask me why, because I don't remember. I was like 11 years old and only half paying attention. The back loop only technique is one to put down in your crochet handbook because it creates such a great ribbed effect that I'm sure you'll want to use again. Don't forget to close off the cuff by slip stitching the first and last row together though. Check out this beautiful cuff. It's stretchy, it's textured, it's got all the good stuff. This part is where it got messy for me. First, we make the tie and that's super straightforward. However, before this pattern, I had never made pom-poms before. So much so that I went out and got myself Pompom Makers on purpose to make these. I do want to point out that that's completely optional. I've seen many tutorials online that show how to make pom-poms with cardboard cutouts and they look just as good, if not better. But I have wanted to buy these Pompom Makers for a while and these Christmas patterns gave me the perfect reason. So yeah, making pom-poms for the first time is messy. I did not expect that. I thought it would be straightforward, but I was picking yarn fluff off my carpet for quite a while. Anyways, they turned out beautifully. The size of the pom-poms is completely up to you and what you prefer. Just make sure you make them in the accent color to give them that pop. And there we have it, the most beautiful stocking of the bunch in my opinion. Easy to make, easy to follow, and absolutely stunning. I adore everything about this pattern, starting with how easy the pattern is on the website and ending with how gorgeous this is going to look in my home. I highly recommend you check this one out. Hey, you've reached the end of the video. I'm happy you're still here. I hope you enjoyed these 3 stockings, watching me make them, and listening to me talk about them. Don't forget to let me know which stocking was your favorite. Was it the Easy Christmas Stocking by Red Heart, the Peppermint Stocking by the Lavender Chair, or was it the Very Beautiful Stocking by Peach and Paige Designs? Or do you have another favorite that I didn't include? Let me know, because if there's one thing I absolutely love, it's collecting crochet patterns. As a reminder, all the links to the stockings we looked at today are in the description box down below, and as of recording this, these patterns are all free, and who does not love free? Come back soon, hopefully next week, to see the next video in this Christmas collection I'm attempting. We're going to be looking at 5 cute Christmas garlands. I cannot wait, and I hope I see you there. Well, you know the drill on YouTube. Do all the things if you wanna, and if not, I'm still happy you decided to listen to me ramble for however long this video ends up being. See you next time, and happy crocheting!